So, what are your options if you call a loan officer and discover all the myriad of expenses that come with buying a property and you simply don't have it? Today, I have Molly Zimmerman from Bell Bank Mortgage here to talk to you about your options. And of course, I will bring you the current Twin Cities, particularly the Wright County real estate market update. I'm Erica Carlson. I'm with a boutique brokerage called Bricks Real Estate. I help people buy and sell real estate all over the Twin Cities, and I specialize in the Western metro area. If you learn anything new today, I'd love for you to join my growing channels, whether you found this on YouTube, my Instagram, or my professional Facebook page. So if you're ready to make a purchase or you just have questions and you want to jump on a discovery call, take a look at the link I have provided in the paragraph, and that will bring you to my calendar where you can set up an appointment time that works best for you. Having extra funds to make that purchase is an important part of the decision making. You can't just think about one particular thing. You need to understand all the various costs, from earnest money, potentially getting an inspection, closing costs, down payment, etc. So I'm going to bring Molly on right now to discuss what you can do if you're running into issues finding that, let's say, extra money. I know that's not really what it is, but if you're excited to buy a house, but you're curious, let's put it that way. Let's find out right now from Molly what we can do to make that possible.
I feel like it is quite often that I'll meet with a first time home buyer or just have a conversation with them, and they have some sort of an idea of what they might need for down payment. But then we start talking about what are closing costs going to run. And there might be that little moment of panic where it's like, oh shoot, like I didn't prepare for that. I didn't realize that, that there were that many costs involved and it was going to add up to that amount of money. So then we start looking at, how can we maybe creatively find ways to bridge that gap, which, we've hit on grants and assistance in the past. I mean, that's obviously one of the first things that we'll look into. Like, would you qualify for a grant? Would you qualify for a program with some sort of an assistance paired with it? And then I just kind of like go down, if that's not an option, maybe in some cases we can negotiate seller paid closing costs. I say that can be property in the market, but that might be a way to kind of help bridge that gap too. Maybe you can get a gift or take out a 401k loan. I mean, those are kind of, I guess, the things I first start with in terms of like those conversations. So I'm not sure, Erica, if you've had buyers ask you this question when with their home search and you've thought of other ways of like bridging that gap.
Yeah, I think like all the things you just said are probably our typical responses. I'm not sure if I can really think of anything else. I mean, of course, it's great if we can tie into down payment assistance. It's a very obvious decision, but we don't all qualify for it. And typically people who are making a little bit more money may want it. I've definitely had people say, I really want this. And it's like, it's very unfortunate. You actually make too much money, which is like a weird thing to like kick back at you. It does kind of remind me of the days of like going to college and needing student loan money where it was like, sorry, mom and dad made too much and it's affecting you. So you kind of feel that theme in your life where that's a thing that you might run into. And we certainly don't want people to tap into retirement funds if they don't have to, or ask for, asking friends and family to help have for that assistance. So kind of being a little bit more proactive rather than kind of having this, now what do I do? Is to get ahead of it and talk to professionals in advance so that you understand the fees. I was just telling you off camera, I met somebody, was having a great time showing them houses around the Twin Cities, very excited about looking at new construction. And then once we really started talking about what the actual closing costs were going to be, coupled with, a couple of other things. Now they had down payment saved, but, I shared with you, they just had such a knee-jerk reaction to, we had no idea it was going to cost this much money. And I don't want to buy a house for 8 months. This could have been avoided. Now, I don't consider that like, I don't want people to misinterpret. I'm not saying it was a waste of my time. I would say it was a waste of their time, because by talking to a loan officer in advance and having financial conversations with somebody like myself in advance, we can talk about out-of-pocket expenses and we can talk about the big things before you're spending time looking at houses at a particular price range, which you might realize, actually, I want to bump it down or I want to bump it up. We can't get ahead of that if you're not allowing the financing conversation early in the process.
Yeah. And I think it's just that whole like mindset of the last thing I want is my buyers to be looking at a property that they fall in love with, but they realize it's way out of their price range, because it's really hard to like, change your expectations and like to look at a lower price point at that point. But if we can have a conversation, a couple other things maybe we can look into. You can maybe borrow against a secured asset. Keep in mind, you cannot borrow money from a credit card. You cannot take
Oh,
out an loan
no.
for payment or closing costs. But if you have a secure, like a car that you can borrow against, that might be an option. And then in some ways, I guess other things that I'll try to do too is just try to balance the interest rate option and the costs associated with that interest rate, because interest rates, the higher you go in rate, the less you pay in cost. So sometimes we can package it where maybe you just take a little bit higher of a rate up front to get into the property, knowing that there might be opportunities to do something to that loan down the road, which we can't ever guarantee timing on that. But
Right.
if you can afford the payment, you're comfortable with the numbers, that would be the most important thing.
Absolutely. So understanding our budget up front, knowing what type of loan we're getting, just having these conversations early. Like personally, I would rather have them before showing houses again, because it's not about me and like preserving time and energy. But again, like what if you find that house and now it just feels like such a smack when it's like, okay, what are closing costs? I had no idea. I didn't have this money saved up. I don't know where it's coming from. I mean, I think most people know down payment is like a part of it. Real quick, earnest money, for those that are not familiar with that term, that's going to be a credit. So even though you need it 2 business days from the time of an accepted offer, it's going to be a credit to your down payment or closing costs anyways. So it's not, if you have the money in the account, it should be a non-issue. Molly, one last question for you. And I know I'm kind of I know you're not prepared for this, but what would you just say generically saying people should have saved up for closing costs percentage wise?
That is, I mean, we've always kind of used the ballpark of around 3% of the purchase price. But it could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, depending on that specific property. And, what are the expenses associated with it? Is it a single family home that you need a full blown insurance policy and you've got higher property taxes? Or is it a townhome where you maybe have an HOA fee, taxes are a little bit cheaper, insurance might be a little bit cheaper. But 3% I would say is a pretty good ballpark estimate just for, pre-planning
Right.
your idea for finances.
So if you do, let's just use the example, like I'll meet people who do have 20% saved, and when we say percent of, we're talking about the purchase price. And now you find out 3% is going to closing costs. It's not the end of the world. I mean, again, you might personally want to stop and like save up more, and try to hit that 23-24% instead of 20. But I mean, technically you do have the money saved, and we can probably work with that if you have that much money saved, as just an example.
Right. I would agree.
That's a
Yeah.
personal decision. We aren't here to determine those things for you. It's just to give facts. So if we made you think of anything and you'd like a discovery call with one of us to just kind of just either get the ball started, or you just want to know about your situation and what you need to be prepared for, we're always going to tell you there's never a point where it's too early to talk to a professional. It's free. There's no strings attached. We're here as a resource to be of assistance if that's something that would be helpful to you if you're thinking about making a move. We appreciate you, Molly. Thank you for joining me again this week.
Thank you.
See, this is a couple days old because our brokerage puts this out on Monday and it's Wednesday. So you can see our market meter is going down a little bit. We're in the 4s now, and definitely not an extreme buyer's market, but not a seller's market either. And there's just always these pockets, right? There's always going to be certain types of houses, certain types of price points where we're going to see multiple offers. And so don't totally get it in your head that just because I'm saying we're more of a buyer's market than a seller's market, that you can completely avoid a bidding war. That is certainly not the case, and I'm seeing that at various price points. Inventory is up over last year, so this is always something we want to watch for a variety of reasons. 0.2% isn't a lot by any means, but it's a trend we want to watch over time to see where things are going. Of course, you would assume if inventory is high, then prices would be down, but that has not been the case. Average days on market, I think it was at like 24, 25 the last couple of weeks. Again, this is just averages. 23, 24, it's been pretty consistent for quite a while. And there's some good news. The 7% interest rate has come down just a little bit. You can see we're at 6.875. This is a general rate, not particular to any, one lender. It's 30-year fixed, base rate, no discount point. So you want to talk to your local lender about that. So let's zoom in on July 31st. Let's look at Wright County in particular and see how it compares to the Twin Cities at large. Beginning with active properties, there's 584, which we don't care particularly about. What we're looking at is trends over time. And just going back here, week over week, this is a very high number for us that we haven't seen in a long time. The 529 without contingencies. So, again, that number follows suit. So even though some have contingencies and not, it doesn't matter. Interesting that pendings has also jumped up in the last couple weeks, which I really wouldn't say I would have expected, because you can see last two before that were lower. Now, I'll be honest, I skipped last week, should have recorded data. My child was in the ER, very sick last week, just had to bring the priorities of, life. That's, family first. So I don't know what last week was, but just kind of surprised to see this number pop up. Maybe it was just a little blip. Maybe it's because interest rates came down a little bit. I'm not really sure. Closings significantly have come down, right? Because we were here in the 200s a couple weeks ago, and now we're, in that, we're coming down. So people aren't going under contract. We are going to look at my favorite data here, which is really interesting. Our buyer activity has significantly increased this week. And could it be a fluke? Absolutely. We've seen that before. What I can't show you on my screen is I do the 250 to 500K range. And it was in particular 500,000, not below, not 499, nothing below. There was a house or a few houses that were just on fire. I don't know why. They had like 7 on average, which we never see in Wright County. So that really threw our numbers, and that can happen. So we'll have to see next week if it stays high or if it was just a particular property that made the real estate market red hot this week. That does happen. It does throw our numbers, because if you look at the 250 to 499 range, right? This is very particular. Then it's 2 showings a week, and one price point was 1. So it we really should be lower than 3.6. So don't let that get in your head too much. If you are a seller and you aren't getting 3 to 4 showings a week, you're not doing anything wrong necessarily. If you are a buyer, it doesn't mean there's a lot of competition. Now, maybe if you're exactly at that 500,000 point, maybe you are. Hennepin is at 4.2. They're, the numbers here make a little more sense on Hennepin, right? Because they were at 4.5, down to 3, down to 4.4, 4.2. Now you can see why I do decimals, because without decimals, I don't catch the nuances of changes. So in simple language, Hennepin's getting about 4 showings per week per listing, 250 to 500K. Wright County supposedly 3.6, but again, I kind of questioning it. It seems a little off. 24 is the median, 34.4 or 34 is the average days on market, all price points, which is higher than the Twin Cities at large. No surprise there. Again, we anticipate we're in a more rural area, less population, less demand to live in the outer exurbs, if you will, than there will be in the metro. So we're not surprised. It is a pretty big jump over this week, which is 2 weeks ago. we're going to have to look for trends because we haven't seen anything since June 12th. And that seemed like it was just off. It just seemed like there was something, it was just kind of a one-off, which is why we do this week over week. So that is it for Wright County data. If you have any questions, I appreciate that you made it to the end. I'm here for you. Have a great week.